Cheers, guys, and welcome to Uncle Scott's PANCAST. Got a lot going on in the old PANCAST today. We're going to talk Ruffoni and some feedback on that big Ruffoni Polenta pot review I put up. We're going to talk Demeyere versus All-Clad copper core, Paella Pans. I'm going to talk a little bit about this knife sharpener. Got some feedback from you guys and more. Let's jump in and get started. First item up is the Demeyere. And Leah Fox 5840 wrote in and said, I'd like to see copper core versus Demeyere Industry and Atlantis from your point of view. I don't actually have one of the industry pans, but I do have the Big Daddy Demeyere Atlantis frying pan. And I've also got the All-Clad copper core. And straight up, if everything were equal and someone asked me to choose between the two, I would go with the Demeyere Atlantis. I think it's about as close as you can get to real deal copper cooking without going into real deal full copper. However, everything is not equal, and there are some pretty big differences here. The first is price. I think I paid about $320 for this Demeyere, and they very rarely go on sale, and when they do, it's maybe $10, $20 off. They're never big sales. This copper core, I think I paid right around $225 to $240. I don't remember to the penny, but there is an almost $100 difference between the two pans. So they are definitely not equal in terms of price. One thing I do like better on the All-Clad, it has rivets. And I know some people hate rivets. The Demeyere Atlantis has no rivets and it has a welded handle. And I've never had any trouble with the welded handle, but it's always in the back of my mind. Could those welds fail at some point? Who knows? And also there's a difference in size. The All-Clad is listed as a 12-inch pan, and the Demeyere Atlantis is listed as a 12.5 or 12.6-inch pan. It's converted from metric. And it seems like there's only a half an inch difference. In terms of cooking surface and surface area and just eyeballing the difference in size, that Atlantis is a significantly bigger and thicker pan. Then again, it costs 50% more, so you should expect a little more for it. It's one of those choices where sometimes it's almost hard to make because you can't go wrong either way. If you're in that $200 to $250 range and that's what you got for a good frying pan, the All-Clad is fantastic. If you have $300 or more, and that's getting up there for a stainless steel frying pan, then I think the Atlantis is a great choice. Let's see, I put up a recipe for Yellowstone / Roosevelt baked beans. And let's see, Paella to Flexheim wrote in, probably mispronouncing that, and said he made the Yellowstone baked beans and they were the hit of the potluck. So if you happen to be going to a party this weekend and need to take a dish for a big game that might be on TV, I suggest those baked beans. People do love them. Let's see, he changed it up a little bit. He added molasses and some ground chili. Nice variation there. When I did the video, I kind of made a joke in there about these were Yellowstone baked beans, and you can make them with either beef or sausage. And we made the joke that, well, maybe if it's from Yellowstone, it should have buffalo or bison in there. My neighbor has been making the recipe, put some ground bison in there, and he really loves the ground bison. So you can kind of use that base recipe as kind of a springboard and change it up however you like. But a fantastic dish to take to any type of big game party this weekend. Let's talk a little bit about the Ruffoni 10-line copper fancy Polenta pot. I put a big review of this guy up the other day, and it's doing pretty well. Got a fair amount of feedback on that, and a couple of things here. First, there were a couple of things that got left out of the video. I thought they were in there, and when I was editing, I must have just cut them out or forgot them altogether. Capacity, it's about a 3.5 quart pan, although I don't think I would fill it quite up near the top using this pan. So you could get 3.5 in there. I'd probably keep it under 3 if it were me. Also in the video, I mentioned that I'm from Alabama and we cooked some grits in this pan, and that kind of set off a little bit of controversy because in the video I made some 5-minute quick grits. So let's get into grits here for just a moment. There are several different types of grits, and when I was growing up, when I was a little guy, I used to get the Quaker, the little packs where you pour in your half cup or cup of boiling water, and they're kind of instant grits, and those were great because back in the day they had different flavors and you kind of got to pick your flavor, kind of like the Quaker oatmeal little packs. I always like the apples and cinnamon. Those were great for grits. The 5-minute quick grits, they're kind of somewhere in the middle between instant and the longer cooking, more traditional grits. And the 5-minute quick grits that I made in the video, the reason I made those, and I don't know if this made it in the video, those were for my son, my little 5-year-old son. And we like him to get a hot breakfast on a weekday before school, and there's just not time for a big in-depth cook 'em up on a weekday. So those 5-minute quick grits, he asked for them, he loves them, and he asked for cheese grits. So sometimes I admit I use the 5-minute quick grits and just put a slice of cheese in there, and he absolutely loves them. On the weekend, when we have more time and everything's a little bit more relaxed, then we do the longer cooking, more traditional grits. So hopefully my Alabama grit eating qualifications are not too sullied by the Polenta pot review. And also on grits, Nuke Engineer 5214 said it reminded him of the movie My Cousin Vinny, where they say no self-respecting Southerner uses microwave grits. I've never actually heard of microwave grits, but I do know they make quinoa in microwavable pouches. They make microwavable rice, some of the Uncle Ben stuff. I'm not sure I would buy it, but I am surprised someone out there has not made microwave grits. And I'm not sure if that's a good idea or an awful idea. Who knows? And I will point out in My Cousin Vinny, when Joe Pesci was talking about no self-respecting Southerner or Alabama person would use the quicker cooking grits, he was not getting a 5-year-old ready for school on a snowy day in Utah either. Then again, after seeing most of his movies, I have learned never disagree with Joe Pesci. Let's see, Isabel 6851 also wrote in about the grits. And I was talking about grits versus cornmeal versus polenta and saying they're essentially the same thing. She points out that there are some differences, and there are differences depending. Sometimes they're exactly the same thing. If you get into nuances, they can be different. So sometimes they're the exact same, sometimes they are not. And she points out that corn for hominy grits, she's talking about ones from South Carolina, is subject to nixtamalization or alkali treatment, and the cornmeal for polenta is not. See, there is a nuance and a difference. If you go with the hominy grits, there is a slight difference with the polenta, but once you take them out of the package, they are both ground up dried corn. And this gets me thinking we may actually have to do a deeper dive into grits and polenta at some point. Let's see, Mr. Spiker 357 said that this pan or pot looks like a bucket with a handle on it. And coincidentally, this pan is kind of a modern, fancier version of what in Italy is called a paiolo. And it's spelled P-A-I-O-L-O. And I think traditionally those did have a handle, and it was very similar to a bucket or a pail. And I wonder if the word pail comes from the word paiolo, or if they have a common root word from somewhere back in the day. Talking about the tin lining, I mentioned that I am perpetually in a panic when I cook in my tin line copper. I do not want to overheat that tin. I don't want to damage the lining. And thankfully, not only with this piece, with some of my other tin line copper, I have not done that yet. If you get it too hot, you can apparently get swirl marks or swoosh marks, and that tin can melt. North Coast Copper wrote in And I looked up his profile, and he's got an Etsy site, if it's a he, and he actually does copper re-tinning. So an expert opinion here wrote in and said, 1 point, it's probably impossible to overheat the tin with any amount of liquid in the pan. Okay, so you definitely got to have some liquid in there. He says, heat energy equalizes quickly in a very conductive system like a copper pan, so you can feel free to use the max setting on your stove if you want while boiling liquids. Now, mentally, I probably can't do that, but he says it's okay. With the gas stovetop and the relatively smaller diameter on the bottom of this pan, and depending on which burner I choose, of course, I don't want any flame. If I crank it up too high, I don't want any flame curling around the bottom and up the sides of the pan. So I was very cognizant of not doing that, but maybe I could turn the flame up just a little bit higher. And he goes on to say that melting the tin really only affects the top layer of excess tin and not the tin that is bonded to that intermetallic surface. That's interesting. He says, of course, you don't want to do that because the nicely wiped tin has a nice look to it, but he says it doesn't make the lining fail. So I'm going to take this under advisement. I'm still probably going to be a bit of a chicken with my tin line copper. So even though I am too chicken to try it, North Coast Copper suggests that tin lining might not be as delicate as we think. Who knows? One of you guys can try it and then let me know. See, Kevin Hullinger, 8743, writes in to say that Ruffoni is legit, and he has several different models. So that's always good to know. This was my first piece of Ruffoni, and didn't have a track record to go on there, but I really did enjoy it, and I think it does seem like a very high quality piece. He says he's got a risotto pan, and I like making risotto, and maybe after we get out of the grits phase here, maybe we'll jump into making some risotto at some point. I will point out to you guys who are younger, perhaps not married, or anybody that's not married, and if you get together with someone and there's going to be a dinner party and everybody's making something, be the risotto guy. It's easy. You can stand there. All you got to do is stir once you get it going, and you can have a glass of wine in one hand and talk, and people think risotto, it sounds very exotic. If you can make a good risotto and be the risotto guy, you will be the hit at the party. Ribollita, Italian healthy vegetable soup. I have a recipe up for that. It's been up for a couple of years. Actually, one of my favorite recipes, and I always say it's the best soup in the world. Let's see, the Kerheb wrote in and said, wow, Uncle Scott, you weren't lying. This really is the best soup ever. So I'm glad somebody actually made that. If it is cold and snowing and wintry where you are, try that Ribollita. Very, very healthy. I say healthy. Vegetable soup. You can make it vegan or not vegan. It just depends which way you want to go. If you're going to go the vegan route, you just use olive oil for the fat. If you're going non-vegan, you can add some butter in there. And for the vegan side, for the liquid, you can either use water, just plain water, or if you got some veggie stock / broth, that always causes controversy when I say veggie stock. What do I do with the leftover veggie bones? I don't know. Or you can use chicken stock if you don't want to go vegan. So a few twists on it there, but just absolutely packed with veggies and really warms you up on a cold winter day. Can't recommend Ribollita enough. Let's talk a little paella. Not really paella weather outside, but I got a question in about paella pans. And George Pagakis, 9854, wrote in and asked if I ever used the stainless steel paella pan I showed in the video. And I think I did, and I think I showed it in a video. Here's the stainless steel, and he's wondering about the stainless steel versus carbon steel and what the main differences are and if one is significantly better than the other. I don't think one is particularly better or worse than the other. Each has their pluses and minuses. I'm gonna need another sip of a drink here in just a second. I don't think one is particularly better or worse than the other. Each have their pluses and minuses. Now, in terms of cooking performance, I can't tell any significant difference. And if there is a difference, it's probably in my head. And I think they both produce delicious paella. The differences, and each has its own pluses and minuses. For the carbon steel, on the plus side, it's very inexpensive. And you can get into a good quality paella pan for $30 to $50. So not very expensive there. On the downside, there is more maintenance with the carbon steel. Now, I don't season the carbon steel paella pan like I do a carbon steel frying pan. I don't try and turn it dark or get a slick coating on there, primarily because in the paella, we often use tomatoes, and tomatoes are acidic, and that kind of eats away at seasoning, so I don't see much point in even trying to do that. Also, on the downside for the carbon steel, you also have to be aware that you can get rusting issues should you leave it wet. Now, in terms of pluses and minuses on the stainless steel is arguably a little fancier looking, and the maintenance is a lot easier. You don't have to worry about any rusting issues. Usually when you make paella, there are people around and you're out on the deck and people are having drinks and stuff. If you have the stainless steel, you can leave the paella pan till the next day and not really worry about the cleanup. You don't have to worry about any rusting issues with the stainless steel. The downside for the stainless steel is the cost. These pans both were the same size. The carbon steel, roughly 50 bucks. The stainless steel, roughly 150 bucks. So 3 times as much for the stainless steel versus the carbon steel. Let's talk about knife sharpeners for just a moment. I recently got this Chef's Choice manual knife sharpener, and I have mixed thoughts on this guy. What I like about it is that it is convenient. It works pretty well, but it's really convenient, and I keep it out on the counter and it's just sitting there, and if I need to kind of touch up a knife, it is an easy way to sharpen. Now, on the other hand, I've got whetstones, I've got electric knife sharpeners, and those might arguably do a better job. With the whetstones, you have to have a little bit of skill, and I'm not ever sure if my skills are up to speed on the whetstones, but you can probably get a much better edge on your knives with the whetstones or even with the electric sharpeners, but those seem to be more like events. The whetstones, it's a mess, it takes a while. This manual sharpener, I like it because I can stick it right beside my knife block and just run the knives through and put a little edge on there. And it's one of those areas where a good job, but really convenient, may be better than a great job that you never actually get around to doing very often. I don't know, what do you guys think on knife sharpeners? All right, cook something delicious this weekend. Hope you guys have a great big game party or two. And we'll see you again next time on Uncle Scott's PANCAST.